All right, what's up? It's your boy CFB Season back with another live show tonight. I'm proud to have our boy Mike, G Irish Talk, join the show. What's up, Mike?
Hey, yeah, thanks for having me. So I'm from Gyrish Talk. My co-host couldn't make it, unfortunately. Brett, he's traveling for work, but I'll give a little background on our podcast. So we obviously cover Notre Dame, and I'd say we really focus on more of an analytics based approach. So it's focusing on stuff like SP Plus, FEI, really any sort of uh, quantitative based analysis is the type of stuff we lean on. We also look at sources like Pro Football Focus as well, though we will take that with a grain of salt. Really, the idea is that we try to dive in on these types of things and glean some insights. And then we also just try to stay as positive as possible. College football can be pretty hectic and stressful, and so we try to give a bit of a positive spin on everything.
How many years y'all been doing this now? And is it just football?
Well, yeah, we're primarily focused on football. We've been doing it for I think it's 4 full seasons. So this next fall that'll be our fifth season. So yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where my co-host and I, Brett, we're just diehard Notre Dame fans, and in our free time, we're just constantly talking about college football. We're talking about the team. And at a certain point, I mean, I'm sure it's the same with you. We're like, you know what? We should do something a little bit more productive. Let's like all this time we're spending on this. We should just actually just do a podcast and see how people like it. And yeah, thankfully, I think it was mainly for like friends and family. But yeah, I'd say we've been like pleased with the support we've gotten so far. So yeah, it's been a good experience for us.
Well, I appreciate you joining in on the show tonight. I've been looking for a Notre Dame guy to come give us a little spring talk, bring spring preview. I'm sure our audience is going to really love having your perspective on Notre Dame. I
Yeah.
guess we could talk about, let's recap last season a little bit briefly. Great season. Obviously, we had that terrible upset week 2, Northern
Yeah.
Illinois. For how the season finished and at the time given for week 2, did you think that was going to happen?
It's interesting looking back to week two. There'd been a couple games like that. I think myself, my co-host, we were very positive about Marcus Freeman, and there had been signs that the team would show up in really big moments. There was a game against Clemson the year before that where we just looked incredible. The team came out, they were fired up, looked like a dominant team, but then we would have inexplicable losses at times. The Marshall game before, that's another one that comes to mind. So I would say a game like that was still kind of on our radar. And then, lo and behold, we have the big game against Texas A&M, huge win, major statement. And then fast forward not long after, and we have this just crushing defeat against, in week two. So it was, I would say my mindset at the time after the NIU game was just, it's like, okay, wow, it feels like it felt like we were ready to take a big step after A&M, but now it feels like we're back to square one. And with Freeman, we're still positive. I was still very positive about it. But I think it was at the point where it's like, all right, if we don't turn the ship around right now, do we have to have an honest discussion about Marcus Freeman being on the hot seat? That's where we were at after that game. And thankfully, he turned it around about as well as you possibly could have. I mean, I don't think I could have ever anticipated that we would have went on a run like we did then. I think at the beginning of the season, I thought we had the pieces to put together a run like that. But after the NIU game, I think it was just everything. We had to just question everything. And I mean, to not even just close out the year on a positive note and make the playoff, but to beat the SEC champion Georgia, to beat Penn State in a thriller, I think I think it was for a lot of fans, it was a moment that they had not felt in decades, honestly. And look, I'm not a lot of people like to hate Brian Kelly. I'm not the guy's biggest fan. I will give him some credit for what he's done. He got us to some nice moments in his tenure. But I think after this season, there's no question in my mind that Marcus Freeman took us to the best heights we've been to since Lou Holtz. So I think the optimism for the program right now is an all-time high. I think it's whereas maybe a few years ago, if you had asked me if I thought Notre Dame could win a national title in the next 10 years, I'd probably say, I don't know. It's tough. It's just there's such a big gap between the top teams in Notre Dame. I think after this season, I actually feel like there's a pretty good chance that we could pull together a season and legitimately win a national title at some point in the next 10 years.
I've been saying it all spring. Notre Dame is a lock for the college football playoff this coming season. I've been saying it. I've been preaching it. Hopefully, more people are buying into what I'm saying. I'm really high on Notre Dame this upcoming season. And, I guess we could jump into that. Let's start with the coaching staff. Obviously, you talked about Marcus Freeman. I love Marcus Freeman. Like, he's a very likable guy. I feel like the
Yeah.
whole country's buying into what he's doing. I feel like the whole country's loving what he's doing. Just very likable guy. So Marcus Freeman, what do you think? Let's see. Actually, let's go into Mike Denbrock, offensive coordinator.
Yeah.
I always say that he's a sneaky coordinator. I feel like he calls plays whenever whenever it's like unexpected and stuff like that. What are you thinking of Denbrock coming to Notre Dame?
I think when we got him, it felt like a coup. We've had some, I would say, Jared Parker was our offensive coordinator we had before that, and he was an inexperienced guy, someone that Marcus Freeman had a good personal relationship with, but elevated probably before he was ready. And I think, frankly, the opinion of most Notre Dame fans, including myself, was that our offense was not performing as well as it should have. Like we needed a better offensive coordinator, and then we got Denbrock, and to me, it felt like that was the absolute best case scenario. I didn't even think that it was something that was on the table, frankly. But I think if you're looking at someone who checks all the boxes, Denbrock basically does. He's a guy with a ton of Notre Dame experience. He led the best offense in the country at the time at LSU. He coached a Heisman Trophy winner. He does particularly well with mobile quarterbacks. He's demonstrated that at LSU and also at Cincinnati. So I think for me, and he's also demonstrated, like we had him at Notre Dame in the past. He's a guy who adapts his offense to the personnel. So just really any aspect you want to look at it, the guy just is off the charts. And I think another year of Mike Denbrock at Notre Dame with the players able to get more comfortable with him and what he wants to do on offense. I think that as good as our offense was at the end of last year, it was still, I would say we still had limitations. We didn't have the most explosive vertical passing game, although it got a little bit better by the end of the year. So I think as effective as our offense was last year, I think there's another level for us potentially to get to this year. And I think Denbrock, for all the reasons I mentioned, I think he's an absolute critical part of that.
All right, jump into the defensive side of things. Lose Al Gordon to the NFL. You make a hire with, let's see, was it Ash?
Ash, yeah, Chris Ash, yeah.
Yeah. So how you feel about that hire?
So
it doesn't strike me as a home run hire, but how you feeling about this hire?
Yeah, I think I'm a little more positive on it. Denbrock was definitely a home run hire. I don't think you could call Chris Ash a home run. I think he fits into the MO of a lot of Marcus Freeman hires. So I would say particularly since Jared Parker, since that hire didn't go how he would have liked, an inexperienced guy in a prominent position, he's tended to lean a lot on experience. So Chris Ash definitely fits the bill. He's coached at many different places throughout his career. He won a national title at Ohio State as a defensive coordinator. The big knock on him is that he coached at Rutgers as a head coach, had a pretty abysmal record. Although I have to call it that Rutgers is a pretty difficult place to perform well at. Schiano is really the only guy who's been able to have that program performing well. And there was actually a gap between Schiano and Ash when Ash took over. So when Ash took over, he wasn't taking over. It wasn't like he was grabbing the baton from Schiano. There had been a number of years, and I think the year before he took over, they only had gotten 4 wins. So he's taken over a struggling Rutgers program. So that's a data point that I didn't want to focus on too much, and I wanted to give him a little bit benefit of the doubt. But I think the big thing is that he's a head coach he's a defensive coordinator that's performed well at various stops. He does have NFL experience recently with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think it's just it's kind of the type of coach that Freeman has hired that has tended to do well. Someone who has some head coaching experience, someone who's like I said, very experienced. And Urban Meyer, like I don't know how much stock you put into Urban, what Urban Meyer thinks, but Urban Meyer is saying the guy's praises. So I would say not a home run, but like someone who, when I heard about the hire, it made sense. It seems like a guy who fits in well culturally. And we also just have Notre Dame has had a great track record of success with defensive coordinators over the last, call it 7 or 8 years. So I can understand why some fans maybe were hoping for like a bigger name. But from my standpoint, I fully expect Ash to come in and keep the, I'd say keep the trajectory of the Notre Dame defense performing at a high level.
And you could also look at it from this perspective. You got Marcus Freeman. It's basically his defense
Yeah,
too. So
exactly. Yeah.
like
Well,
you can't
and
you
with
can't
the
be too underestimated.
exactly, and with with the line of successful defensive coordinators, I mean Marcus Freeman's one of them, and yeah, like it is really helpful to have a head coach who is extremely knowledgeable about the defense, and like Coach Freeman he'll have opinions about things. He'll have a lot of insight into the personnel, and that's something that'll be certainly invaluable to Ash as he settles into his role as defensive coordinator.
So for the rest of the staff, was everyone retained or did you lose a position coach?
We lost our running back coach, McCullough. He went to the where did he go? He went to the Raiders. So he went to so when you have, I mean, that's what happens when you have a really good year. Our running backs in particular had an exceptional year. So when that happens, your coaches can get called to bigger and better things. But we replaced him with the Penn State running back coach, Cedar. I think I'm pronouncing that right. So I think in terms of replacing what we lost in the running back, for running back coach, I think we got one of the best possible guys that we could. Penn State has had a long track record of successful running backs, and even as recent as this last year. So from my standpoint, I thought this was, I think for that role, this was about as good a hire as you could have. So I think he probably looked at the prospect of coaching Jeremiah Love and then our deep staple of backs with what looks like it should be an exceptional offensive line group next season. I think that that got him interested in making a jump to Notre Dame.
Man, that's a great hire. I mean, look at the backs he had at Penn State. Now he comes and he gets Jeremiah Love. Jeremiah Love's about to explode for another phenomenal season.
Yeah.
So let's talk about some player personnel. We're gonna start with the offense. Man, you gotta give us an update on the quarterback battle. How's the quarterback room looking?
Yeah, this is the number one topic, I think, in spring ball, and I think it will be the number one topic going into fall camp. I would be very surprised if we name a starter before before summer, before the fall. It sounds like Freeman is trying to distribute the first team reps among Minchie, Angeli, and Carr. Just kind of get a look and see how all these guys are doing. It's interesting if you read the reports from different beat reporters, they all seem to have different opinions. I would say more of them seem to think that CJ Carr is likely to eventually win out the top spot. So I guess for a little bit of a dive into each of these guys. So CJ Carr, so he will be a sophomore next year. He has freshman eligibility. He is the son of Lloyd Carr, who's the legendary Michigan coach, which is a fact that I think a lot of Notre Dame fans like to point out. He was a top 50 recruit. At one point, he was a 5-star. Although his stock dropped a little bit near the end of the recruiting cycle, but good size. He's like 6'3". Now he has a full year in a college weight room. Spins the ball exceptionally well. I think the one thing you always hear about him is just how accurate he is. He's like that level of accuracy where he can essentially throw receivers open, and that's not something I would say that we've seen at Notre Dame in a while. So last year in the spring game, he was someone who should have been in high school. He enrolled early. And I don't, you don't want to put too much stock into spring games, but it was definitely the best I had seen, from someone in his position in a spring game type scenario. Just, I texted my buddies after the spring game, and I said, I was like, guys, I think we might have gotten this one right. This guy seems like he has it. So expectation is for him to eventually win it. Apparently, he's a little indecisive still, going through his progressions. But he was also hurt most of the fall. He hurt his shoulder. So I think as he ramps up and gets more reps, hopefully that becomes a little bit cleaner. So if Carr is call him the high ceiling guy, less proven, Angeli would be the opposite of that. Not that he has a ton of experience. So Steve Angeli, he was more of I think he was like a low 4-star, high 3-star type guy. I would say probably like lower ceiling, higher floor. We've seen him in action a number of times. He's certainly someone who's been able to elevate the passing game pretty effectively, most notably against Penn State. I mean, we would not have won that game without Steve Angeli. And I think with him, it's like clearly he's accurate. He can go through his progressions. He has a strong arm. If not like an elite arm. He's not as mobile as these other guys, but he has more mobility than people give him credit for. So I think with him, it's like we've seen him play well against tough competition. And if he wins it, it's like I think it's still a good scenario for Notre Dame. Like we know he can be a good quarterback. He'd probably start at most places, but he doesn't necessarily have that same upside that someone like CJ Carr does. And then I got to talk about the last guy, Kenny Minchie. So recruiting profile was I would say between CJ Carr and Steve Angeli. He was like I think around a top 150 guy overall. A little smaller, 6'1", but very mobile. He's not as athletic as Riley Leonard, I would say, but definitely more athletic than these other guys. I would say his strength is that if I guess I don't want to say he does well in chaos, but it's like I would say he's effective at like if the play breaks down, he can make something happen. I would say he's good at like engineering big plays kind of out of nowhere. I would say his big fault is that sometimes he makes critical errors. So he did that actually pretty recently. There was an open practice on Saturday, I believe, and he played well most of the day, but then at the very end of the scrimmage, he just threw a back-breaking interception. So that's the thing with Minchie. Apparently, he's played well in spring ball. I've seen a couple beat reporters say that he's looked the best. For what it's worth, that's not the consensus opinion. I think the consensus opinion is it's going to be CJ Carr. But that's where we're at right now. I think one thing that makes it a little trickier to evaluate these guys is that a lot of our key guys on the offensive line are either sitting out or injured. So really the defensive line has just been kind of like just teeing off. So it can be a little harder to evaluate these guys when there's pressure in their face constantly. Obviously they're not taking hits, but it's, the play breaks down. So yeah, I think if I was just going to give a summary, it's like, I would say likely CJ Carr wins. But it's definitely not, there's still more to be written about this, and don't be stunned if Angeli or even Minchie, ends up winning this. And we probably won't know until we get closer to the fall.
Yeah, this is going to go all the way into fall camp, huh?
Yeah.
And would you agree that Denbrock's play calling was a little handicapped last season because of the vertical passing game not being there?
Yeah, I mean, it started to open up later in the season, I would say. Interestingly, against, I would say, our best competition against Penn State and Ohio State. Ohio State was, I would say, Riley Leonard's best passing game. It was when we were finally able to actually get some deeper balls. But yeah, I think for sure. I think Denbrock is at its best. He's at his best when he has a quarterback with at least some mobility and a quarterback who's obviously a very effective passer. And by the end of the year, I think Riley Leonard was getting there, but it certainly wasn't at the level of a Jaden Daniels. And not that you need them to be at a level of Jaden Daniels to have a successful Denbrock offense. But I think, I think that's the thing. If someone like CJ Carr plays to his upside and we have a quarterback who can, is so accurate, he can throw receivers open and, really elevates our passing game. I think that's a very attractive proposition for Denbrock. I think it's certainly opens up the playbook in ways that we couldn't last year.
I kind of noticed that whenever Angeli came in the game against, what was it, Penn State maybe? Or
yeah.
I can't remember which one it was, but he came in the game. I feel like he kind of opened it up a little bit in the pocket. So yeah. I'm curious to see what the passing games. I mean, if you could take a jump at that passing game, I think it's going to be a deadly offense. And it sounds like you higher on Carr than Angeli, just from kind of what you were describing a little bit. But we gotta let everything play out. It's still got a long time to go from spring.
For sure. Yeah, it's it's interesting. I'm higher on Carr. I'm also leaning on kind of like what I think. One theme I would say with another thing with spring ball is that like access has been fairly limited. So it's kind of a lot of what I'm going off of is like what I'm hearing from staff and beat reporters, and we do get some insights occasionally, but. So I'm kind of going off of that. Like I definitely have more. I've definitely seen Angeli, playing live way more than I have Carr. So there's definitely a bit of a projection out here with Carr. So there's a little more uncertainty, but based on like how high the staff seems to feel on him, I think actually the way I'm thinking about it is like I know that Angeli is a good college quarterback. If Carr is able to beat him out, that just tells me that the staff must think that this guy's, like the next great Notre Dame quarterback. And I would say his recruiting profile and everything else I've heard since then seems to be consistent with that. And then even his spring game performance last year. But yeah, you don't want to discount Angeli. The guy's, he's a good quarterback and he's extremely mentally tough, gritty. Dude's a gamer. You mentioned that it was the Penn State game. It was right before the end of the half when it was probably, I would say before we started to kind of come back. It was around the time that was, I would say, like a low point for Notre Dame in that game. At that point in the game, I definitely thought that things were trending the wrong way. Enter Angeli, and then he, helped us drive downfield and got us back in a position to be competitive, and not only be competitive, but end up winning the game. So hard to completely discount a guy like that.
Man, I'm looking. You got both backs coming back in Jeremiah Love and Price.
Yeah.
The whole country knows about Love. I picked up on Price in a couple of those games. He makes plays every now and then. He's kind of a sneaky little play whenever he
Yeah.
comes in. He's really good in the passing game. So it looks like the backs won't take no drop off there. Both of them coming back.
No.
Honestly, I think Jeremiah Love could be in the preseason Heisman talk. I
Yeah.
think he's gonna have one of those years where like he puts up like 1,500 all-purpose yards.
Yeah. He's
um,
he's special.
he's the best player.
Yeah, I think most NFL draft scouts, obviously not, he's not going to the draft this year, but I think most scouts, I think most of them have him as the number one running back in the country. Like he might have, like if he went into the draft this year, like he might have been the number, it's possible he would have been the number one back off the board. So yeah, with him, it's just running back. Interestingly, is a position that historically Notre Dame has recruited pretty well, but we haven't gotten those top end guys that you would see at Alabama under Nick Saban. This is one of those guys that we finally got. I mean, I would say when I watched him earlier in his career, you could just tell there was something different about him. He just had that combination of size, explosiveness that we hadn't really seen before. And I mean, look, you see him, he'll hurdle someone, he'll stiff arm him, and he's also exceptional in the passing game. That's one area that we get a lot of usage out of him as well. So yeah, I noticed you mentioned all-purpose yards. I think that's with him. He could definitely get a lot of yards in the passing game as well. So I think, and the scary thing is what he did last year. It was behind a very inexperienced offensive line, and an offensive line that had a ton of injuries throughout the year, and it held up much better than I think anyone would have expected. But coming into this year, now I mentioned this before, but now they're very experienced. It's a very talented group. It's a group that should have a lot of cohesion. And I think if Jeremiah Love was able to do what he did last year behind a patchwork offensive line, imagine what he can do behind just an absolute elite offensive line that should be among one of the best in the country. And look, and we don't have to. It's not like we have to force feed him 30 carries a game. We also have, as you mentioned, Price is a phenomenal. I mean, it's almost like a insult to him to say he's back number 2. I think a lot of coaches will call him 1A, 1B, but yeah, Price is look, he's at pretty much any other college football program in the country, he'd probably be the number 1 back.
And Price is good in the pass game as well.
Yeah.
Man, whenever I think of Notre Dame, I think offensive line. I mean, y'all produced so many greats throughout your history. I know a couple offensive linemen hit the portal, but that could be a sign that they might have read the writing on the wall for next coming season as well. And so you very high on this offensive line. Returning starters, what we looking like on the line?
Yeah, so you mentioned we had a couple guys leave. So the notable ones are so Pat Coogan I think he's the one who probably got the most attention because he played a lot down the stretch. Then the other guy is Rocco Spindler. And those are the I would say the two highest profile guys. We also had Sam Pendleton. He was another guy who was in the rotation. He started actually early in the year. The thing with those guys is even if they Pendleton, he wasn't starting at the end of the year, but Coogan and Spindler were like a key part of what kept our offensive line intact down in that stretch run. And a lot of people were surprised to find out they transferred. The thing is, the reason that they were starting those scenarios because the original starters got injured. And I think at the end of the year, what happened is they basically had an honest conversation with the coaching staff. The coaching staff said, "Hey, like we would love for you guys to be a part of this team. We can't guarantee you a starting spot." And like I think they were essentially indicating that once some of these other guys get healthy and come back, those are the guys who are likely to start. So I think they saw that and they said, you know what, I could start pretty much anywhere else, and that's exactly what they did. But I don't want to downplay the loss that those guys are because those 3 guys are probably numbers 6 through 8. There's a good chance they could have been numbers 6 through 8 in our offensive line room. So inevitably injuries happen. I think that's when it's gonna, that's when it could potentially ding us. Although we have young guys who are coming up and I think also have some potential to make a jump. But yeah, I mean, in terms of the depth chart, I mean, we have some familiar names from this season that'll be back. So Anthony Knapp, he was a true freshman last year, played the entire year, certainly took his lumps, but I think for a true freshman, played about as well as you possibly could have. He's projected to be starting left tackle next year. And there's some differing of opinion about where these guys are gonna fall. At left guard, it's looking like it'll probably be Billy Schrauth. Billy Schroth was, I would say, last year probably our best offensive lineman. He was injured at times last year, but overall, just a very consistent interior lineman. So absolute critical piece of the offensive line. Center is one area where we get a guy back who's supposed to be starting, who would have been starting if he stayed healthy, and that's Ashton Craig. He got hurt and missed most of last year, which was part of the reason that we had these other guys fill in. At right guard, Charles Jagasaw. So this is a guy who was hurt most of last year. This guy has an elite recruiting pedigree. He basically he was hurt all year, but then he got healthy enough to play at the very, very end, of our playoff run and in the championship. And he played like he didn't even miss a beat. Held up extremely well against Ohio State. And he's someone that we certainly I expect to be one of our top offensive linemen next year. And then finally, Emil Wagner. This is another guy who was a first-time starter last year and played just consistently well all year. He's actually on a reduced pitch count, you could call it, in the spring, just because of the deep playoff run. So I think he's like one of those guys that because he got so many reps throughout the season, he's actually, I think I read he's mainly just like weightlifting during spring practice. So, but those are the guys to know. There are other people to keep an eye on. So Lambert, he's another person on the offensive line, potentially a tackle. He actually got hurt during spring ball. Some people were expecting that maybe someone like him could make a push for a starting spot. So that's a name to keep an eye on as we get to the fall if he gets healthy. But I think it's those five seem to be the ones that I'm locking in on. And if you look at all these names, you're going to see a lot of high recruiting profile pedigrees. And now we have a lot of experience. And so I think the expectation from my end is they should be a Joe Moore Award finalist. I don't know if they're going to win it, but maybe the following season they could. A lot of these guys have multiple eligibility. It's possible you see pretty much all this team coming back the following year. So if it's scary for this upcoming season, fast forward a season after that, and it could be one of the best Notre Dame offensive lines we've seen ever, honestly.
I'm looking at the depth chart. I don't know if there's a senior starting. Well, let's jump into the wide receiver room maybe. So we got Greathouse, really. That was like the best athlete out of the wide receiver room I noticed last season. Yeah, I think he's probably the wide receiver one from my eyes. He's returning. Any other names from spring preview practices and reports? Who else is stepping up?
Yeah, so I mean, you're right. Greathouse is our wide receiver one, and last year I would say we didn't really have a wide receiver one, maybe until the last two games. Denbrock, he'd indicated last summer, kind of in the lead up to fall camp, that if there were a number one receiver who could emerge, it probably would be Greathouse. We finally saw that against Penn State and Ohio State, and apparently he's been tearing it up in spring ball as well. The other key names to know are Jordan Faison. So he's a guy who I think we'll probably put him at field receiver. Fun fact about him, he's actually an excellent lacrosse player. So he was part of the national championship winning Notre Dame lacrosse team from last year and is a key member of the team this year. So he's like right now he's actually balancing his lacrosse and football responsibilities. So you're not going to see as much of him in the spring, but he's one of those guys who's actually originally a walk-on, but just forced himself on the field because he was just constantly making big plays. And he doesn't necessarily fit the profile you'd expect from a walk-on. He's actually very fast, very quick. Doesn't go down as easy as you'd expect. So it's not even that he just, he's just like a wily, knows how to find the right spot. He knows how to do that, but he actually has like a much better athletic profile when you watch him play than you'd expect from someone who used to be a walk-on. So he's someone who I would expect hopefully to take another step this year. When he's fully healthy and ramped up, he has the capability to make some big plays. And then we already talked about Greathouse. He's he's likely to be at slot receiver. And then finally on the boundary, my expectation is the transfer of Malachi Fields will be the starter there. So he's a transfer from UVA. He had over 800 yards last year. So big time player from a power conference. And I think with him it's interesting to note. So he's certainly the number one wide receiver at UVA. So he got a disproportionate number of the targets, but on the flip side, there was a big drop off after him. So teams were able to really focus on him. I remember when we played UVA, we basically put Leonard Moore, our stud freshman corner, and Xavier Watts on him. We blanketed him the whole game. So he had to deal with that
Yeah.
as well. So if you have now he's on a team that has an elite running game, hopefully a quarterback who can really sling it downfield, ideally a better wide receiver room. It'll be interesting to see how he performs. But I think those are the top three guys. The question more is after that, who emerges? Because we have a number of younger guys who have some interesting recruiting profiles. One name you're going to hear a lot about is Cam Williams. He was the top 50 overall wide receiver. Really a notable recruiting win for Notre Dame. It's wide receivers, an area that we haven't recruited maybe as well as some of these other positions. So he's someone who has a great athletic profile. Apparently he's looking better in spring ball, but it's one of those things where he's gonna have to prove it first. But someone who certainly could take a step up and maybe be a contributor. Micah Gilbert's another name. He's from the same class as Cam Williams. Not quite as highly touted, but I believe he was still like a pretty solid 4-star. He's someone who's apparently flashed a lot in practice. He had a couple drops when he got into games last year, but again, young guy. Unfortunately, he got hurt in spring ball. So if he's going to take a step, it'll have to be like when he heals. I think he's supposed to be back by the summer though. So those are a couple names to keep an eye on. And I think finally the other guy would be Will Pauling. So he's transfer from Wisconsin, productive there. Nothing exceptional, but a very solid player. And I think one thing to note is that he, he's already familiar with Denbrock's system. He was at Cincy. He's been at Wisconsin. There's one thing I would say with like a lot of our Notre Dame assistants is that they have they come from a very common ecosystem, whether it's, a lot of them are from Cincinnati. And so Pauling is apparently he's already familiar with a lot of the key tenets of Denbrock's offensive system.
Man, I'm looking at Malachi Fields, 6'4", 220, back-to-back 800-yard seasons.
Yeah,
when looking at all the personnel, everything's lining up to be scary, especially if the quarterback play, shapes up how it is. Lastly, tight end.
Yeah, so tight end. We lost Mitchell Evans to the drafts, and yeah, look, he was another very good Notre Dame tight end in a long tradition of Notre Dame tight ends. So that is a question mark. I would say we do have pieces that could take a step. I've heard that Eli Raridan, he's apparently been looking, he's been flashing in spring ball. He's a guy who's very athletic. The problem with him is he's just had a lot of injuries throughout his career. So the hope is that he's past these injuries, and if he is, he's a guy that I would not be surprised to take a step and become, have the look of a true great Notre Dame tight end. Maybe he's not going to be one of those guys who goes high in the NFL draft, but he has the potential to play like a very good tight end for Notre Dame. But I wouldn't expect him to be. This is not a year where we're going to have, like a Kyle Rudolph or like a Tyler Eifert or someone like that. I think it's the hope is that we just get like solid tight end play, and then behind him, it's I would say it's like a little bit of a. There's no one that's I would say exceptionally proven. So the hope is that Raridan can take the big jump. So we'll see. But yeah, that's an area that's not as big of a strength as it has been in the past.
And with all the talent everywhere, you don't really need that position to really thrive. Like how you said, you just need solid tight end play.
Yeah, I should mention Cooper Flanagan. That's one guy who's had some injuries, and when he's back, he might he's hopefully someone who would be productive as well. We also have we got a transfer from Arkansas, Ty Washington, who should provide some depth as well. But yeah, I think the hope is that the receivers make a big enough step, our quarterback makes a big enough step that it's not as critical that we have a top end tight end this year.
All right, let's keep the Notre Dame preview going. Let's jump with the defensive side of things. I see some familiar names. We got Christian Gray in the back end. Let's start with the secondary.
Yeah, so the secondary was last year. That was the strength of the Notre Dame defense. By many metrics, it was the number one pass efficiency defense in the country. Showed up big in a lot of moments, generated a lot of turnovers. So I think where you start is the cornerback room. So it's interesting. Like we lost Ben Morrison, but Ben Morrison was actually hurt for most of the year. So we kind of had to make do without him. The guy who stepped in, Leonard Moore, played about as well as you could have hoped for a true freshman. I think there's no doubt in my mind the guy's a future stud. I mean, he played like a star last year. So I think from that standpoint, our frontline starters in the cornerback room, I expect them to play well. Christian Gray had a couple moments last year where some receivers were able to get by him, but he also had some really big plays. He had some very big time interceptions, some pick sixes. So I think that's a great place to start in the cornerback room. After that, that's where it gets a little bit dicier. I would say there's a much bigger drop off after those guys. We have two other cornerbacks, Hobbs and a true freshman, Cree Thomas, who've been so far they've been getting second team reps. I think ideally those guys don't have to see a ton of time, but we'll see. But I think important for those two guys I mentioned, Gray and Moore, to stay healthy. And I think with Moore, it'll be, as I mentioned, he was a true freshman last year. I'm really excited to see the jump in play that he makes, because he actually, interestingly, I think if I'm remembering correctly, as good as Ben Morrison was, and he's my co-host has the opinion that he's the best Notre Dame quarterback that we've had in decades. He's going to be like a first or second round pick. I think his draft stock has dropped a little bit because of his hip injury, but I think Moore actually I think he actually might have graded out a little bit better, believe it or not. So again, just enticing to see like how big of a jump this guy will make. But moving to other parts of the secondary, we got phenomenal play from Jordan Clark last year at the nickel spot, and before that we've generally had a lot of success bringing in grad transfer nickels to come in and play at a high level. Thomas Harper was another, that was someone who's also played at a high level before that. But Clark has gone to the NFL, and we brought in a transfer from Alabama, Devontae Smith. Not that Devontae Smith. It's a Devontae Smith
safety.
Exactly. But yeah, he was a productive starter at Alabama, and so apparently he's playing exactly how they'd expected. And he's someone who's going to be a key contributor for us. So I don't expect the drop off there. In the safety room, we're losing Xavier Watts. That's the really big loss because, whereas I mentioned Ben Morrison is a big loss, but he was hurt for a huge chunk of the year. Watts he played pretty much all year, was healthy, and is one of the most productive safeties that we've ever had. So that's a big loss. There's no way that you can just easily replace that. The other safety who was alongside him last year, Adon Schuler, he's back, and he's a guy whose play improved throughout the course of the year, and he's someone who I expect to make a jump. So really the question is who's going to fill in at that other that safety spot that Xavier Watts is leaving behind. And there are a couple guys that we have a transfer from Virginia Tech, Jalen Stroman. He was hurt all of last year, played well the year before that. But the question is how is someone going to like that going to play when he's actually back after a long layoff, and he's actually hurt right now. He's on campus, but he's he won't be healthy until the summer. Apparently, a younger guy, Tate Johnson, has really been flashing though in spring ball, to the point to where I've seen a couple beat reporters mention that they think they basically are saying Stroman better be ready to go because Tate Johnson looks like someone who's bringing it. So I think that's a name to watch. Certainly, there's going to be a drop off from Watts. There's no way you get around that. I think if last year we had the number one secondary in the country, I think this is still going to be a really good secondary. There are a couple things that you could pick at those, as I mentioned. There's not as much depth in at corner. We're filling in that other safety spot, but I think there's potential here for this to be a maybe a top 5, top 10 secondary. A lot of it will depend on injuries and how we fill in that one vacant safety spot.
So we lose Watts, lose Jordan Clark, lose Benjamin Morrison. We bring in Devontae Smith and Stroman, right?
Stroman, yep, that's right.
Yeah, Tate Johnson's flashing as well, you said. So I'm going to keep my eyes on those secondary backs. Let's see. What about the front seven, the box? I know we lose, Jack Kaiser to the NFL.
Yeah.
Man, y'all got a cat from Louisiana, Jaden Osbury. I remember covering him in high school.
Yeah.
He's projected starting linebacker.
Yeah. So I would you mentioned it. We lose Kaiser, who'd been, it feels like he'd been at the program forever. I think he had the record for most number of games started. And then we lost other key contributors in the front seven. So Howard Cross, Riley Mills. I think those are big time players for us. Cross and Mills, those guys were hurt or banged up for a lot of the year. So, some of that impact it's not like we had him fully healthy for the entire year. Mills, he able to play in the stretch run down the down the playoff. But yeah, but in terms of starters, yeah, I mean, I think it's Drake Bowen, Jalen Steed, and then Osbury. I think those are our starters. And like I said, losing a guy like Kaiser hurts. Very productive player for us. Knew the defense inside and out. Was really like the brain of the operation back there. But those three guys I mentioned, they have a bit of a different athletic profile, and certainly, they improved over the course of last year. And I think all those guys are poised for pretty big jumps. So as effective as our linebacker group was last year, I think this is a group that could make a jump. And then, even on the defensive line, the guys I mentioned, Howard Cross, Riley Mills, those are big losses, but they were dinged up. And we had a lot of injuries on the defensive line as well, particularly on defensive end. So we had Jordan Botelho, Boubacar Traore. Those guys were very effective pass rushers. And, they were out most of the year. And I would say one thing that really hurt us against Ohio State was our inability to get an effective pass rush. And I think that's something we were able to kind of manufacture ways to do it throughout most of the year. But by the end of the year, it finally caught up with us. So we're getting both of those guys back. And I mean, just when I was watching the season last year, there was definitely a difference in our ability to generate a pass rush with those guys. So I think we gain on the edge and enhanced ability to rush the passer. I think in the interior, look, there's probably going to be a bit of a drop off, even if I am like discounting the impact of Cross and Mills just because they were banged up. But apparently the transfers that we have coming in, I mean, look, apparently the defensive line has been looking better than people have expected so far, particularly defensive tackle. Like Jared Dawson from Louisville, who's a very productive player for them. Apparently he's looking like a surefire contributor. Jason Onye, that's a guy I got to mention. So he was out for most of last year. He's I would say for the past couple of years, he's been one of those guys who's been trending up and up and up. And one of those guys that you could definitely see making a big jump to be a big time contributor. So that's another name to keep an eye on. Jason Onye. I expect him to have a big year. And then Hughes, a defensive tackle from USC. Apparently he's been performing like he's someone who's going to be heavily in the rotation. So I think if you look at, you look at the interior defensive line, we also have Heinisch and Rubio. Those guys are proven guys who should take another step in their play with another year. I think we have a lot of depth there. And I think it's, maybe like we won't have the same upside that we had with a fully healthy Cross and Rubio. I think that there's a lot there that should not give us a huge drop off. And then when you factor in the increased ability to rush the passer off the edge, and as I mentioned, my expectations for the linebacker room to improve, I think we're looking at an improved front seven. So maybe the secondaries, maybe they drop off a little bit, but I think our front seven could take a step up and play. So I think when I'm looking at our defense, there's definitely a lot of reasons to talk yourself into optimism.
You got to be able to get up to the quarterback a little bit more. I'm looking at the sack production across the board from last year. It's kind of spread out. Yep. Riley Mills led the team with 7.5. But then if you look at everyone else is kind of getting like 0.5, 2, 1. Yeah. Make some threes. But I see what you mean about the pass rush production needs to get a little bit better.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that was going into Ohio State, that was probably our biggest weakness because Traore, Botelho, those guys got hurt early, but they were very effective at rushing the passer. Like Bryce Young, he's a young defensive end who came in and played well too. But yeah, that's where we saw the biggest drop off. And then Rubio, Mills. Mills. You mentioned his sack number. He was just playing at a whole nother gear at the end of the year. Just like a guy who could just rush the passer from the interior line. So, having him out for the Ohio State game. Yeah. And there was a noticeable difference in the pass rush from earlier in the year to later in the year in my mind. And if we can recapture that pass rushing ability, I think that just completely changes the game from a defensive standpoint.
I'll tell you what, let's look at the schedule for next season. I want to get your outlook and perspective on the schedule outlook.
Yeah.
I'm gonna share it on the screen for us. All right, you see it?
Yep. Yeah, I got let's see. This is
Whoa. No, this 1 second. I need Notre Dame schedule. That was college football schedule.
All right, yeah.
Here we go. All right, there we go. All right, so we start off the year with Miami. I'm not as high on Miami, to be honest.
Yeah.
I know they get Carson back, but they also lose a good bit, and they got changing with the turnover with the staff. I don't feel like it's a good mesh. I could honestly see Notre Dame winning this game by like 2 touchdowns. I'm just let's start there with the opener.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. They're losing Cam Ward. They get Carson Beck, but Carson Beck had a brutal injury, and
yeah,
who knows? Like, he's not, like, I would say when you have a transfer quarterback coming in like that, you ideally have the offseason to kind of get them up to speed on everything. And on top of that, I think I read there's like their top 6 wide receivers like they're all gone, right? So this is an offense that's just they're completely building it from scratch. And if you had an entire offseason to kind of get the quarterbacks and the receivers on the same page, like maybe you could do something. But I think I would say just with all the production they're losing,
it was
just
their
lack
running
of
back.
Yeah, exactly. I just
coordinator.
Yeah, they're losing so much. I would expect there to be a drop off, and particularly by the first game. I think that when you're dealing with all that, it's really hard to kind of have everything working by the first game. Maybe look if they figure it out, maybe by the end of the year they're looking like a better team. But I would expect the drop off. I mean, the one thing is that it is at Miami, which is a place that historically Notre Dame has had trouble with at times. We had I think it was maybe 2017 or maybe it was 2015. I forgot what year it was, but this was a really good Notre Dame team. We got absolutely blown out by Miami. It was an away game for us, and it was just one of those inexplicable losses. Like, Miami was good that year, but and we were good that year, but we certainly played like our worst game of the year that year. And then obviously there's the BCS national championship in 2012, which was also at the same stadium, the Hard Rock. Although we did exercise some of those demons this year, thankfully in the Orange Bowl. So it's still a place that gives me the spooks a little bit. But I think, I think we're positioned. I think we're positioned to win this game. I expect Miami to have a drop off. I'm actually, and like getting into the next game, Texas A&M that's a team that I'm a little bit more worried about. I like Elko a lot as a coach. I think everywhere he's been, he has, like, there's been like a straight line, like upward, improvement each year. And certainly there were some moments last year where I think A&M's they could certainly poke some criticisms at him. But I mean, look, that's a loaded roster. They just have elite talent everywhere. Elko's, I think he's a coach who really knows what he's doing and is going to get those guys playing at a higher level. I guess there's they have a question at quarterback with Marcel, but he's someone who's probably poised to make a jump. We have them at home. I think look, as good as they are, I think we're better, and we have them at home. So that's like another one that I would expect us to win. And then
Purdue and Arkansas, I got us wins as well.
Yeah, Arkansas is interesting. If you look at a lot of the advanced stats, the record has certainly been disappointing. They're more I think they're a team that's more competitive than what their record shows, but they just they seem to be lacking that killer instinct, and that definitely counts for a lot. I mean, even if the advanced stats have you as performing better than you should, wins and losses, those still count. That's still the most important thing. So yeah, I think I have those as wins as well. Boise, I mean, obviously they're losing quite a bit there, so I think they're going to have another big drop off. And we also have them. We have them at home. I mean, I think the other games I want to call out here, USC, that's a big game, obviously. I think Lincoln Riley, they're another interesting one because they're like one of those teams where any given day, I think they could be really competitive and beat a good team. I mean, this past year, like they had a disappointing record, but they played very competitively in most of their games. They almost beat Penn State. They played Notre Dame pretty close up until the end. And their quarterback, Jaden Maeva, like I thought he played a really good game against Notre Dame and up until the end. I mean, he threw 2 pick sixes at the end. So that obviously you have to factor that in, but that's a quarterback who I think if he improves could help. But overall, USC, they've had a lot of transfer. Yeah, we do have them. Yeah, exactly. We do have them at home. That helps a lot. And they also have a lot of transfer turnover. It's a program that I think has been kind of disappointing under Lincoln Riley's tenure. So you never want to totally count out USC, but I think this is a year that we should have their number for sure.
I think the trap game's at Pitt.
Pitt is historically been a trap game for Notre Dame. So you can get into the nuances.
That's the trap game.
Yeah. So, because look, I think it's after Navy, and a lot of Notre Dame fans would tell you that there's a Navy hangover, which usually you see like whichever opponent we're playing the next week, because you got to prep for the triple option, which is totally different than anything else you're going to face, and then you got to go back to facing a regular offense after that. So yeah, I think that would be one to watch for sure. It's also on the road, that makes it more challenging. And I think if the season is going how we want to, ideally we're undefeated or have maybe one loss going into that Pitt game. It's this is where like Marcus Freeman's coaching and motivation really needs to come into play, because it would be very easy for a team to look at the end of that schedule and say, okay, like we can just we can just mail it in, and we basically have our ticket stamped to the playoff. So Freeman will have to avoid the pitfalls that we fell into for the like we talked about it earlier in the show, the NIU game.
I tell you what, 11-1 and undefeated is definitely on the table.
Yeah, it's a manageable schedule for sure. So
yeah,
I think we have like there are like teams that should be good who are on here, like Miami and Texas A&M. Those are the big, I think those are easily the toughest games in our schedule. USC will be solid. I think Arkansas will be solid. And then after that, there's even, I would say, a bit of a drop off after those guys. But look, it's I think if Marcus Freeman can keep the guys focused week in, week out, which he was able to demonstrate after the NIU game this year. I think the expectation for Notre Dame has to be 11-1 or 12-0. And I think making it to the playoff is kind of like a minimum expectation at this point, which is, you don't want to get too spoiled as a fan, but also that just speaks to what Marcus Freeman has done, like how he's elevated the program.
Yeah. Do y'all go to the games as well?
I tried to. So I was an undergrad at Notre Dame. So when I was there, I went to every home game. I went to road games, and then I try to get to. I live far away. I actually live in California, so it's not South Bend is not the easiest place to get to. But I try to get to one home game each year, and then if there's a road game that's nearby, I'll try to go to that. So like when they're in LA, I'll try to go there. Sometimes they've had neutral site games in like San Diego. I went to the college football playoff game, home game in Indiana this year. So I'll try to do stuff like that. If I can swing a bowl game, I'll go. So I try to, if I can make it work, at least one or two, ideally a couple more than that if I can swing it.
Well, man, hey, we appreciate you joining and giving us a great preview on Notre Dame. If you can let the audience know where to find y'all and stuff like that, and give a subscribe, like, and follow.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, thanks for having me. It was fun talking about Notre Dame. It's just we're still a ways away, from the start of the season. But I think once you hit spring ball, then you can look forward to the summer. And once you're in the summer, then you're really not that far away from the start.
How's your off season going? You feel like the off season is going by smoothly, or?
I'd say like there hasn't been any big negative news headlines. And from my experience as a Notre Dame fan, I'm always going to take that as a positive. We don't have any players who, are getting in trouble with the law I remember back in 2014, we had a bunch of guys who were just like tossed out for academic ineligibility. So we haven't had anything like that. I think obviously like I would have liked for Al Golden to have stayed, but I knew that guy was going to greener pastures at some point. He just had done too good of a job. Can't blame him at all. Was that?
Where do you think Notre Dame's going to be ranked preseason?
I'd probably guess around like 7 or something like that, maybe. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe somewhere around there.
Just outside the top 5.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. It's as you get closer to the season, if the hype at the quarterback position is growing, I could see like the media talking themselves into a higher ranked Notre Dame team. And also we're going to be like a really high profile week 1 matchup. So not to discount the impulses of the media to try to like boost up like, how big a week 1 game is. So yeah, I would say like my gut is telling me around 7, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're top 5. I think we just have a lot coming back, and I think that the areas that we're replacing, there's a lot of reason to believe that we'll be able to fill it. So yeah, it's I'm excited for it. But yeah, in terms of where to find my podcast at, it's so on Twitter, it's just at Gyrish Talk. I think there's an underscore between Gyrish and Talk. And then on YouTube, it's Gyrish Talk. I don't think there's an underscore. So Gyrish Talk, either an underscore or not an underscore. And that's basically how you can reach us. And yeah, follow us, subscribe, give us likes. We're happy to engage with anyone on X. Yeah, I mean, I think that's like one of the most fun parts of hosting a podcast.
Yes, sir. Well, we'll stay engaged with you, and we can't wait for the season.
Yeah, likewise. It was good to do this. It's always fun doing guest spots, and yeah, it's like now when I'm like if I'm interacting with you on X, I have a face, a face to the name. Yeah, and I think that's it's always nice to have.
Yep. All right, man. We're gonna close out on that.
Okay. All right. Thanks again.
Peace out.